For this one, we'll be reviewing the Springfield XD 40 caliber 4-inch blued semi-automatic with California Standard Issue Magazine's 10 rounds per magazine. What's provided in this video is meant to be a solid foundation that should cover most of your bases as you begin to explore, discover, and learn about all of those elements that are involved with owning and responsibly engaging a firearm. Although this is a fairly extensive introductory video review, please feel free to take it in bite-sized pieces or turn to each chapter in as-needed per section study sessions. There's no need to feel overwhelmed by all of this information. As you become more familiar with your firearm, a lot of these elements will become second nature, and the more that you go through each of these elements and practice them in person, they'll start to become more natural and more intuitive. The first thing that I want to cover in this review are the safety considerations. The 5 rules that I use for gun safety when handling a firearm is as follows. Treat every weapon as if it were loaded. Never point the weapon at anything that you do not intend to kill, shoot, or destroy. Keep your finger straight and off of the trigger until you're actually ready to fire. Keep the weapon on safe or in a safe position until you intend to fire. And know your target and what lies beyond. So we have a few things here that we'll address before we actually get down to the firearm itself. These are some of the main accoutrements that you might want to consider. This one here is my own personal choice of eye protection. I always use eye protection whenever there's anything that's going to be happening on or near the range. So this one here, I'll provide a link later, but this is great. It's a sport action version, and you can actually get them with the changing lenses that will darken in the sunlight. They're about 30 bucks, and they're called Rock Bros. And this is just one of the ones that I favorite often, but it's not the only thing that you have to use. It's just one of the ones that I found to be extremely durable, as well as fitting my face and all the elements for the protection of the face when you're using it. The next thing would be ear protection. This one that I have here has been with me for not quite a decade, but almost. I like this model here in particular because this one is sound dampening for what you might get with your ear foamies, but as well it allows you to have pass-through listening, which means that you can still have a conversation with anybody on the range, or you can listen for any instructions that might be called out. And these are also about 30 to 45 bucks. You can get them on Amazon. I'll provide a link for that as well. So these ones work here by an on-off switch. Here they take just a few, I believe, AAA batteries, but we can check on the link here. For safety, one of the things that you want to consider, if this is a personal firearm kept at home, I would always store this in a safe. Remember, when this firearm is in your name, whatever happens to it ultimately will fall back on you. If there was an accident by a spouse or caretaker or visiting family, whatever it is, this firearm is your responsibility. You need to make sure that you treat it as such. So I always keep it in the safe. For myself, I also always keep it holstered. If you have this holster on it, that will prevent somebody from just mindlessly, oh, let's see if I pick it up and put my finger in there. So I always store it this way in the safe. One of the last considerations for storing your gun properly is when you're making a transfer, say from your home to the firing range or somewhere outdoors that you might be shooting. I always take that factory lockbox and I put the firearm in the lockbox with a padlock on said lockbox. And I do that separate from the ammunition. So for instance, I'll put the ammunition in the vehicle with me, in the cab of the car, let's say, out of the reach of the driver, and then the lockbox with the gun in it that is locked up in the trunk of the car. If you have a trunk, that's great. If you don't, like you're in a truck or something to that effect, or maybe an SUV, I would at least put it far out of reach of the driver. If it's home defense, then I would recommend getting hollow points, of course, in .40 caliber for your .40 caliber XD. And these are two brands that I might consider, although they're not be-all, end-all. They just are ones that I've found luck with. This one here you can see when I purchased it, probably 4 or 5 years ago. So in 2016, 2015, 16 bucks. And there's 25 of them. I'll just show you these here real quick. So you can see the hollow point here. That's good for home defense. And the other one in the box is roughly the same. I keep, for myself, at least 2 magazines that are filled with these hollow points here. And that's so that in a home defense situation I can just go and grab the magazines, not be worried about loading them up or anything, but those magazines are designated for hollow points only or home defense only. And then we get to, you've got here, this is just your standard range level quality bullets here. This is just one example. There will be many others like Remington or Smith & Wesson that got their own versions. And there's all sorts of fancy different variations from hollow point to standard snub nose, rounded. You got different jacketing types. This is the cheapest of the cheap. This is what I just put on paper here, so that I'm only spending about 33 cents per round versus the hollow points. You can do the math on when I got it several years ago. 16 bucks for 25 of them. A bit more expensive. But these guys serve me for the majority of my purposes when I'm training. And I go through, if I'm doing well, I go through about at least 1,000 rounds per month. That would be 12,000 rounds if you just kept it at that per year. But when you actually start gearing up, then you can find those cheaper blazer type rounds, so that if you're wanting to do 2,000 or 3,000 rounds per month, I would recommend doing roughly 200 per month minimum, 200 rounds. That's just something that keeps you polished along the way. It's not a requirement, but it will put you definitely above the rest of the, I think, average consumers for firearms. This device here is the factory issued rigid holster. I employ it when I go to the firing range or outdoor shooting. I actually wear it on my belt, along with the magazine holder. Also has a belt loop. So I keep this on my left side because I am right-handed. I keep this on my right side because I'm right-handed. Something that you can do that will keep you organized when you're practicing either at the range or outdoors. These are kept full, magazines, and when they are full, I have them in the forward position so that when it's against my body, here, they're facing bullets forward toward downrange. Okay? When I cycle through all 10 per magazine and I exchange magazines, I actually then replace an empty magazine, if I'm going to be replacing it here in the magazine holder, in a reverse position so that in the dark or I'm not looking down to see what do I have available, I can just feel it and know this one's empty. I don't have to think about it. So let's say this one was empty, I'll put it there. I'll then load this one into the gun, and then when it runs out, and I also flip it and replace it here. And then when I reach down, I can feel those are both empty. I can either discard these and replace them with full magazines in the correct position, or I leave it empty. Okay? Just some helpful tips. This is a standard issue from XD. Springfield provides this here. And this is what I was talking about. I'll keep designated ones. Now this one, this is my backup, so this is a third magazine. I have the other one that is stored in the gun. That's also hollow point, so I've got 2 magazines hollow point. And one is a backup, one is regular. Just as a quick point of consideration, when handling this piece of machinery, understand that although it is precise, and there's a lot of little moving pieces in here, you have to understand this is very durable, and you need to handle it as such. So for instance, when I'm trying to rack one into the chamber, I've got 10 in the magazine here, I'm going to handle it knowing that it's very durable, and that I have to be very firm with it. So I'm not going to just give it a half-hearted little pull. I'm going to rack it back with full strength and force. Okay? If you're doing safety drills or training drills, you want to make sure that you're handling this as if it's a loaded firearm until you've actually identified and secured for yourself that it is actually not either loaded, or if it is loaded and you're doing dry fires, you have dummy rounds only. Dummy rounds I have in here right now look like this. Neon orange identifies these are not live rounds. And I keep these dummy rounds separate from all of my live rounds. And when I'm actually doing any kind of training, I double check and triple check that my dummy rounds are the only thing in the field. Okay? All my live rounds are put well away, often locked up in the safe. This assembly and reassembly will be very useful for when you're cleaning your weapon or you're trying to address any malfunctions. Here's just a quick couple examples of the mechanics of your firearm. You can familiarize yourself with them at your leisure, but it's probably not critical unless you're looking to become a master gunsmith or an FFL. Okay, so I want to make sure that this is clear. I'm pulling it back, not muzzling myself. Then I push my thumb up for it to catch. Once it's caught, let it go. And then I'm going to check both down where the magazine receiver goes here, as well as I want to look inside and check the chamber. And then I'm going to turn it so that I have a view so I can see that there's nothing actually caught inside in the barrel. Okay, so I'll actually do a quick finger check. Be sure not to touch this button here, which is slide release, when your finger is inside. That will, at best, damage your finger and at worst, demolish it. If you need to use your hands in the future, be very careful when you're actually putting your fingers inside here. Okay, it's a lot of spring power. Now that it's clear, I'll bring it back, and then I'll go over some of the other details once you see that it's clear. Okay, So, to disassemble this, I'm going to bring the slide back to the slide catch, pushing my thumb up here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to flip him up here. Okay. Then I'm going to pull this down, making sure that my fingers are not in the range of motion. Okay. Once you've done this, I'm going to pull the trigger and I'm going to hold down the beaver tail while I do it. That's going to release the mechanism. Do that click. Also, if you look carefully, the slide actually jumped up a bit. Okay. Then I'm going to slide it off. Here, very easy slide. Okay, then let's get down into some of the details here. The slide actually contains the barrel, as well as a spring here. This is the first thing that we're going to address for a full field strip. We're going to take this spring off. Here, just pops off with a little bit of tension. I'm just going to remove it, set it aside here. Okay, so now you can see there's 3 pieces. And we're going to get it down to its final position, which is 4 pieces. You can just lift it out, and I'm going to pull it back. And then I'll set it off to the side here. And now you can see that without any tools, this here is completely stripped down to the bare bones where you're able to access. Okay? So now you can see I've got the 4 pieces here. For the lower, you want to make sure that when you're reassembling, you haven't changed any of the positions here. It's just this guy. If you bring it down and then you try to reassemble it here, this guy will actually prevent you from having it go back on smoothly. I'll show you real quick. I'm stuck here. I'm jammed up. Alright, so the first thing that I want to do, going slowly, I'm going to start with the barrel here. It's a chamber receiver. I'm going to put this down on in. It's that same motion. I just slide it back in. Got to kind of wiggle it till it drops down. And then I pull it back here until you hear it go thunk. Hooks right in. Fits nicely. Now I'm going to take the spring here, this slide spring, and drop it in. Now I want to make sure that this slide spring is lined up, because if it comes off tilt here, you can see that here's the midline. This is centered, and this is off. What happens is, when you're reassembling it, if it slides off of this little catch here, you can get a really good jam going on. It actually takes a tool to fix it, and I can get to that later. Now you've got these 3 upper pieces reassembled. Now you're ready to, if this is in the correct up position, you're ready to slide it back on. You'll look here that there's grooves in the back here and here that fits with this here. Okay. So that's the rail guide here. I'm going to line it up just in front, and then you're going to see that it fits down that track. It's got that nice slide here. Okay, and from here, you see that it lines up here as well. I want to continue it past the little catch, and I'm just going to continue it past here. Then you're going to meet here a little bit of resistance once it stops, and this is coming from the spring. Okay, so this slide spring here, it's going to take a little bit of effort. I do this over the top grip like a C cup. I grab it here at the back, and I position my hand here against the grip down below, so I can give it a full rack with my arm strength. Okay, and if you are a female or smaller in stature, not hitting up the gym all the time, you can actually bring it closer to your body and use your body to really give that force. Okay, so I'm going to pull it back, and at the same time, watch my thumb here is going to lift until it actually catches the slide catch. See if I can demonstrate that without muzzling myself here. Okay. Here, pushing up with the thumb, then it catches. Okay. See, this is actually what's holding it now. From this point, then you can actually drop this lever back down here, the thumb, click, Okay, now we're all reset and re-engaged. I need to just reactivate here the whole setting by pulling down on this, and watch your fingers, any parts of your hands that doesn't pinch, especially back in here and this up in here when you bring it down. Okay, I'm pulling this so I'm still not muzzling myself, and I just let it free drop. Some people think, oh, I want to assist because I don't want to jam it up. My own personal motto is, if the gun can't handle it, you've got the wrong gun. Okay, so I'm just going to drop this down here. You can hear that loud thump and click. That means it's re-engaged. Let's check the back here, and you'll see that there's the pin has been engaged here. I want to disengage that just for myself. I'm going to check again real quick. Okay, there's nothing. We're clear in the barrel chamber, in the magazine. Before then, I actually depress the beaver tail here, and I pull the trigger to disengage the pin. You see that here. Okay, now we're disengaged. So nothing here that exposes the pin. That means the pin is disengaged. And this little notch up here tells me that there's nothing in the chamber. When there is something in the chamber, you'll actually see that this guy will be popped up. I'll show you that in a minute here with the dummy round. Okay. Now you're all reset to go. You can now add the magazine in here. To do that, I'm just going to take this here, facing forward with this angle. Makes sense because the bullets are facing forward as opposed to backward. Won't go. So I'm going to just slide this in here and give it a nice little push until I hear there's a little bit of resistance. Click when I give that push. Click. Okay, that's about 10 pounds of pressure or so. Alright, now we're all in. Now if I rack around with this dummy round here, I pull it straight back and let it go. Okay. Now I can actually see this little guy is no longer in the down position. And I check here, and the pin as well is engaged. If this was a live round and I pulled the trigger right now with the beaver tail depressed, it would actually fire off a round. Okay. So I'll give you a test here. I'm going to do a sanity check as always. Make sure that I'm seeing that there's something in there and that I have dummy rounds only. Never mix your dummy rounds with your live rounds. Bad call. Okay. Click. Now if that was a live round, it would have actually fired off. The slide would have blown back, come forward, and cycled the next one in line on the magazine. Okay. So, since it's a dummy round, to retrieve this, I'm going to depress this magazine release button, which on the XD40, you have an ambi, so you can go either direction, left-handed or right-handed. Nice. Once I've pressed that, it does this little pop out. I'll do it one more time so you can see. Watch the magazine. Think. Comes out. I'm going to remove that. I'm going to set it aside. Okay. I still have one in the chamber. I need to eject that. Now, you can either give this a strong pull back on the slide, and that should eject it here. Or if you want to practice capturing your rounds, like if you have a live round that was a dud, you want to make sure that you're not just letting it freewheel all over the place. I'm going to actually do that same C grip with my hand. I'm going to put it over where the chamber ejection port is here. And I'm going to use this slide catch to have the slide lock in the back position, which will then expose or open the chamber and the rounds inside. Okay, so the way I'm going to do that, grip it here. I'm going to tilt it upside down because gravity is going to feed it to my hand. Okay, there it is, and it's fallen into my hand here. I'm going to set that aside, and I'm going to do a quick sanity check again. You can never be too safe here. Nothing in the gun. Okay, now I'm going to release it. Pin is engaged for myself. I like everything to be in a neutral position when I'm starting. So, because I cleared it, I'm good with that. I'm going to clear it so it cycles the pin forward here, and now I'm at neutral. Okay? Now, I can just reload this, so I've got 10 active in there. So then I can go through and walk you through the full field strip with a magazine and all of your rounds. Okay, never muzzling myself. Finger off the trigger. And I'm ready to go for a full field strip. Now, when I practice a full field strip, I'll actually start with one in the chamber. That's in case I actually receive the gun and it's ready to go. Self-defense, let's say. You pull the trigger, bunk, we had a malfunction. Let's say it's a squib, which is a dud round, essentially one that didn't fire off. The pin struck the back, but it didn't actually fire off for some reason. Gunpowder was stale or whatever else it might be. So I'm going to rack one so I can practice that, okay? And when I rack it, that C grip here, I'm going to grab behind the chamber, not when I'm trying to catch. I want to give it a good, full, strong press back here with my left hand and be pushing with my right hand forward, okay? Finger off the trigger. Here it is, fully back position. And I just let it go. And it will cycle itself forward. Now let's check. Did that actually cycle one in the chamber? Indeed, it did here. You can see. And the pin is engaged. Okay? That's a great check. Nice feature about the XD, Springfield XD40. You can actually, in the dark, feel it here without muzzling yourself or anything. I just reach in and say, oh, there's one in the chamber and the pin is engaged. You can even feel that when you have the standard factory rigid holster. Okay? That's still exposed just enough here. You can see it's starting to tuck behind, but I can reach forward thumb and forefinger. I just give it a quick check. Yep, I'm ready to go. Okay, let's see if I can get it to a failure point with that slide spring to see if it'll require me to use a tool. Now, right off the bat, you'll notice that it actually doesn't want to feed in when the spring is offset here. Notice it's actually jamming up against the frame. But I'm going to see if I can wiggle it off just enough and then offset it here. See if I can get it to fail. Nope, too reliable. Okay, I was finally able to get it to mechanically fail here. It's almost dummy proof. We'll see that there's something that's obviously very wrong with this setup. Here. This is disengaged, so everything else is aligned internally, mechanically speaking. But I'm not actually able to cycle it back. I can't get the slide to actually catch and the slide catch here, so I can't disassemble this. And this is in a non-functioning order. Let's see if I can then demonstrate how to get yourself out of this pickle, because right now this firearm is more or less a doorstop. It's completely useless. So I'm going to pull this spring here, slide spring past. I want to get it realigned on that track. See if I can get it to set back in. I'm having to kind of wang on this here. And you can see that I'm finally able to line it back up on its track. And it'll set back down. That's a rare mechanical malfunction when assembling, reassembling. It took me 15 minutes or so to actually get it to the fail point. And I had to get kind of creative. Again, it's almost dummy proof, but if that happens, just know that until you employ a tool, that's going to be out of commission here until you get it back on track. One last thing that I want to show you is what it looks like in a magazine is employed without the upper. You kind of see the inner workings of what's happening in the chamber and the barrel region. So, with that, let's do a walkthrough of the full field strip. Full field strips are meant to be used as an exercise with your knowledge of the mechanics of the firearm, as well as your aptitude in handling your firearm. This is what it looks like. You saw the video that was much more rapid. It was a timed version, just to see how proficient I am. But this one I'm going to do a walkthrough so that you can actually see what it looks like step by step. First things first, I need to remove it from its rigid holster here. I'm going to set it aside. We want this out of the way for the next 4 pieces that will be laid out here in a nice organized fashion. Okay. I'm checking this here. We've got one in the chamber. Pin is engaged. I want to disengage that system. So the way that I'm going to do this is to first remove the magazine so that another one from the magazine doesn't cycle forward accidentally. So I'm going to press that ambi magazine release button here. Click. I'm going to pull it out and I'm going to set it to the side. Okay. My next step is I need to clear what is in the chamber right now. So that C grip here over the top with my hand covering the chamber. Okay, like this, so that when I pull it back, pushing with my right hand, going back with my left, engaging the slide lock catch, and face it down so that gravity does the work and feeds it into my hand. I've now removed it. I can do a quick check. Okay, we're all clear. And if I want to continue the full field strip, I'm going to push this up again. So from the down position, disengaged, and up position, engaged. With that, watch your fingers and bring this slide release catch down here. Alright, you hear that loud thump and click. Depress the beaver tail and pull the trigger. And still, even though I've cleared it, I've done my sanity check, I know there's nothing in here, I'm still, when I pull the trigger, not going to muzzle myself or anything else that I'm not willing to destroy or kill. Okay? I'll do that now. You can see that then it feeds down. Again, if you're pointing at the ground and there's nothing to catch underneath, be careful that it doesn't slide off, especially when it's nice and clean and new. I'm going to then manually disengage this. I'm going to set the lower back. So I have the other pieces disassembled now. Okay. And like we did before, I'm going to take that spring, it's a slide spring that's connected to the barrel here right now, just by pressure. I'm going to pop it up with my thumb and forefinger. And it wants to pop out pretty nicely. I'm going to set that aside here. Okay. Then I'm going to use my pinky. I'm going to give it a little push. The barrel here. Give it a little push up, just so I can have something to grab with my thumb and forefinger. I push it up. I'm going to give it a little slide forward so I'm not catching the back of it here on the mechanism's side here. Okay. I'm going to pull it out. I'm going to set it aside in order here. I'm going to leave this face up. There's my 4 pieces, along with the other 3 miscellaneous pieces here, magazine, free rounds, and my rigid holster here from the factory. The next step that I'm going to accomplish is I'm going to empty all of these. And I want to empty them in a nice little spot that stays contained. So I'm just going to protect them as they come out. So there's a spring that's pushing up, so when they pop out with that resistance, don't want to spring away. I'm going to just cup my hand around here. I'm going to use my thumb, that same familiar C grip now, in magazine. And I'm going to feed them with my thumb forward into this little pile. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, which makes 10, because I had one that was free floating already. These are 10 practice rounds. And then I'm going to set the magazine down. And I'm going to actually, with my hands, just as a drill, touch my chest. That means I'm backed away from this disassembled whole setup here. Touch my chest, then I can bring my hands back into the field. Okay? I'm going to start for myself by reloading this. I want to get all 10 back in here. I have a nice strong grip here with my left hand. And I'm going to use my thumb on my left hand to push this guy down. that will help my right hand, thumb and forefinger, to get it then loaded back up. This is something that I've seen if you don't have hand strength, it gets a bit more difficult, especially for rounds 8, 9, and 10, as there is a spring down here that is giving you that resistance. The more you can press it, the harder that you get that resistance here. And there's 6, 7, 8, harder, 9, 10. And real quick with 9 and 10 especially, those are the hardest. I'm going to push this down. This guy with my thumb and forefinger, I'm going to do this little J shape as I push it in here. If you do it too far up, it catches, you can't get it. So you have to do it right as this declines here. I need to make sure that the back of the round is in front of that decline this way. I'm going to use left hand thumb to push down on round number 8. My thumb and forefinger with my right hand. I'm going to do that little J shape. Push it back in so that then it's flush. Okay. And same with round number 10. Okay. Alright, now the magazine is all loaded. Set that aside. Now I want to start the reassembly process for the full flip strip. I'm going to start with second to the top here, lining that guy up. I left this facing up so that then this can just be gravity fed back in. I'm doing that little, again, J shape in here. I'm going to push it just a little bit forward or past, and then bring it back until I get that nice quick thump where it's actually set in. Then thumb and forefinger here. I'm going to use my thumb and forefinger on my left hand to guide its entry. Okay, so this is where it's going to want to sit. Is in here. This little reservoir. I'm going to push that in. Then I'm going to use my thumb and forefinger to help me index that it's on the midline. I want it to be right in the middle of this center piece here, this catch point. Alright, so I'm going to use my thumb and forefinger to push forward until it clicks on down. And then I'm using grip strength here, thumb and forefinger, to line it up in the center. It's pushed off. I'm indexing with my thumb this mechanism here. This is the bottom of the barrel chamber catch for the slide spring. And I'm going to just pinch it into alignment. Now I can feel it's aligned. That upper is now reset. Okay. And you'll notice here that in these drills, this is muzzling myself, but in this stage here, this is not actually an active firearm. There's nothing in the chamber, and it doesn't have a mechanism, the lower, to engage the pin, which could have anything go off. You could do it manually if you got creative. There's the pin catch. I can pull it back. It's tough and let it go. But you don't have to worry about that for these drills, as there's going to be only dummy rounds whenever you're doing this. And there's going to be no engagement of the pin here, with nothing in the chamber. Okay. Now, that upper is set to go. I'm going to then grab the lower, and then the upper, right hand lower, left hand upper, that C grip here. I'm going to line it up in that rail system here where you can see it wants to just feed in nicely. Okay. This guy is still up. My thumb is going to be catching in the slide. Let's see where you can see it. This little groove here is going to catch in this guy here. I'm going to use my thumb to push up and make sure it locks in. Okay, so that C grip here, pushing with my left hand and with my right in the opposite direction, slides in. I pull it back against the resistance of the spring. I push my thumb up. Okay. Now it's caught, it's set. Now for myself, the next thing that I do, after I put this guy back down to re-engage it, is I'm going to take the magazine and I'm going to put it in. And the reason why I do that is so I can skip one quick little step, which will automatically load my firearm when I finally have it in its full ready position. Okay? So if you notice right now there's 10 in the magazine. This guy here, he's ready to feed into the chamber and the barrel load position. Okay? When I pull this guy down, this slide release catch here, when I pull it down, it's going to automatically toggle one forward. It's going to catch on the back. It's going to feed it up into then that barrel. Okay? So I can watch it here. Let me check to see if it did that. I can check here. Alright, this guy is up. And the pin is engaged again. So now, remember the safety rules. Finger off the trigger, please. So I just give a little quick click. Eyesight check. Good. See that reflection? I know that there's one in there. Now you're all reset. Okay. And then I set it back. And then I pull my hands back out of the field. Now I know that I'm complete. I'm done. It's ready to be fired. That's when I stop the time. There's two main stances that you'll see with a firearm. The first is the weaver or defensive stance, and then the second is the isosceles or A-frame stance. I'll talk about both of those here. The weaver or defensive stance is something that I've employed for myself over the years training with a firearm, and that generally comes from my background in martial arts, as well as a couple other points of consideration. First, it minimizes your silhouette or your exposure of your body. And it also, for me, allows me to be a little bit more agile and dynamic, a little bit better balanced. It helps me be able to move with the firearm. With defensive or weaver stance, you want to think about how you balance yourself. Your feet are going to be offset, left foot forward and right foot back if you're right-handed, with your feet at a 45-degree angle. You should be settling into your feet so you're very stable. If you're right-handed, your left elbow is bent, maybe a little bit more than a 45-degree angle. You're going to want to tuck that elbow in so that you're collapsing it into your silhouette as much as possible. And your right arm is straight out with your right elbow locked forward. Your left hand will be pulling back. Your right hand will be pushing forward. This push-pull allows for great stability of the firearm. Your left shoulder will be a little bit forward of your right shoulder, again maybe at about a 45-degree angle. Your head will be turned facing forward, downrange. If you're right-handed but you're left-eyed, it's a little bit more trouble to get that situation of the head. If you're right-handed and right-eyed, it's a little bit more of a natural position. If you are moving in the weaver or defensive stance, you want about a 60-40 exchange where when you are moving forward, your back foot will receive 60% of your weight while you pick up your left foot, and you're going to set your foot down, heel, then toe. So always keep my toes a little bit elevated. Then when you're moving the next step, you want to have 60% of your weight on your front foot, or left with your right hand, and about 40% on your back foot. Still with your back foot, you're going to be setting it down, heel, then toe. So keep those toes elevated. The isosceles or A-frame stance is most commonly employed by military personnel and especially police officers. It's a very good stance for creating a good stable base. You've got very good balance laterally. You'll notice that your left side and your right side are mirror images of each other. This is for stability. Your foot position will be both feet facing exactly forward, and they'll be just a little bit wider than your shoulder width, depending on your body structure. Both of your arms are extended straight out, with your elbows locked in the forward position. The gun is held midline, and so your head is often, if you're right-eyed, slightly off to the left, or if you're left-eyed, slightly off to the right. The isosceles or A-frame stance is a little bit more difficult to be dynamic as far as say, walking or to stand behind cover. These are just a couple points of consideration as you think about whether you want to adopt the Weaver or defensive stance or the isosceles A-frame stance. There are pros and cons to both of them. You'll have to kind of feel it out for yourself and determine what is best fitting for my purposes as well as my aptitude with the firearm and those different drills that you might be running. Okay, I'm going to show you the grip here. There's a couple different variations on grip, but I want to show you just how to get started here. I'm going to start actually with my right hand, since I am right-handed. I'm going to be choking up very deep here, up under that top end of the lower. Okay, so I don't want any daylight between here and here. I want to be really tight up in here. Alright, then I'm going to place my fingers also choked up. My right hand is the dominant position, so it starts off your grip. My finger is still off the trigger. And then I'm going to mirror or match that with my left hand for the space that's left over. I want to create what looks like almost butt cheeks here by clamping my left hand up against my right hand. Now there's a point of consideration of where do I put my thumbs. Some people cross over. I do not. I like to keep them tucked up against each other here with my right thumb on top. Okay. For my left fingers, I'm going to be tucking them up underneath over the top of my right fingers. Okay. And then this is going to tuck underneath. I have very wide hands, so this is going to be a little bit different for your hand size, as well as if you're a lady, your hand size is going to be very different. So you're going to need to feel this out. But the key element here is that you have a very tight grip and you're trying to make sure that there's no daylight between any points of contact. Notice that my pinky does hang down underneath, but I don't let it drop down underneath. I keep it tucked up as much as possible. The next thing is then you want to see that your wrists are straight, and with your right hand, if you're right-handed, you're going to be pushing forward. And with your left hand, you're going to be pulling back. And we talked a little bit about that in our stances. So my wrists are very firm. If you have loose wrists, this is where you'll see, especially for ladies, say with 9mm, where the weapon itself doesn't have as much of a bang as, say, a 40 caliber, 45 caliber, or 50 caliber. If you, what they call limp wrist it, you don't have firm wrists. When you actually have that recoil, when a shot goes off, here, it will actually hinder the full cycle of the slide. So when the bullet actually has that explosion that sends the actual bullet out and the casing ejected, it sends the slide back, and it has to get to that full back position for it then to have room to pick up the next bullet in your magazine that feeds up into the chamber. So if you're limp wristing it, what happens is you get only a partial slide come back here, and then it catches or doesn't allow it to feed the next one in the magazine. So very firm wrists, very firm grip, no daylight. Tuck everything up against it here, real tight. For me, left thumb goes down and right thumb tucks on top. From here, I have that left hand pull, right hand push, and I align the firearm so that my right eye, as I'm right eye dominant, is looking right down the middle of my sight. We then want to go into finger position on the trigger. So since I'm right-handed, finger off the trigger until I'm ready to fire, but I'm going to demonstrate the placement here. I want to make sure that the pad of my dominant forefinger here, this area, it's bisecting the trigger. When I put it in here, tucked up nice and tight, it's going to just rest lightly on the trigger. Here, I'm not going to go too deep. I want my finger to come past, so I'm using below the knuckle. That's not good. I want to use just the pad of my finger. And this firearm, the XD40, is about 4 pounds of pull. There are ones that are less, like competition guns, There are also ones that are more. So with my finger lined up then, the biggest key of trigger control is that once you have your stance and your grip all lined up, your eye sighting is there, when I am pulling that trigger with my finger, I want to make sure that I'm not changing anything else about my stance, about my grip, about my sighting. And that's the most common thing where you have targeting problems, is when people are trying to anticipate that trigger pull. They either try to resist it, and that's pushing down, or try to assist it, that's jerking up, or you might get, if you're too deep in the trigger here, you're going to be pulling it back offline. If you're too shallow, you might end up pushing it offline. So with a push, you get left of the target, and with too deep and a pull, you get right of the target center line. The most separating element is then how your body responds when you're anticipating that trigger pull. The best thing to do is not anticipate it. Okay, I've got a dummy round here so I can show you the trigger pull. Alright, so when I'm actually all lined up with my grip and my stance and my eyesight, I've got the target in front of me, I'm always picturing that I'm going to do a nice, soft, slow, smooth pull. I breathe in, I exhale, and at the end of exhale, I picture a tube of toothpaste, no exploding rounds. Very slow and smooth. Toothpaste. This toothpaste exercise really is what separates good targeting from poor targeting for myself as well as a lot of other professionals. The killer of targeting is anticipation of that trigger pull. If you are anticipating that the gun is going to rock back with the recoil and then you're trying to resist it, you're going to get low targeting. If you're trying to assist it because you know it's going to rock back, you're going to get high targeting. I'm always very mentally relaxed and specifically picturing with each trigger pull, toothpaste, toothpaste. No bang, just toothpaste. And you can test this with dry firing at home. If you have dummy rounds like I have here, I would actually employ what they call either the empty shell dry fire or the penny practice dry fire. And watch that my smooth, slow action will not jump the round off of the firearm. There it is. At the range, every time that a round goes off in live fire, I want to be completely surprised. If I'm surprised, that means that I had no anticipation, which also means that my body, the grip, the stance, the eyesight, none of that is going to change in anticipation of that explosion and the slide rocking back. Okay, for sighting your target, you want to see Orion's belt. Now this, you can see down the front, has the rear sights and the front sight all lined up. If I tilt it off one side or the other, notice that you lose the picture of the front sight. Orion's belt are those three dots, 1, 2, 3. You'll see if I change the angle up and down, I'll lose the sight there as well. You want this nice, balanced, steady, front-facing Orion's belt. The appropriate practice for sighting is once you have Orion's belt lined up here, you're going to look at the target, then you're going to bring your focus back to the front sight, not the rear sights. So you want that middle one, Orion's belt buckle, in view as the last thing that you see and are focused on is obscuring your target ahead before you pull that trigger nice and slow and smooth. And here's a couple examples of what your target will look like depending on how your sights are lined up. If you find that you're having consistent grouping patterns that are not aligning near or close to the bullseye, please feel free to use a chart like this one to try to diagnose what it is that you might be able to change to get those groupings closer to on target. Now, addressing the target, there's two factors that you want to consider. One is accuracy, and the other is precision. Accuracy is how close are you to, say, the bullseye. Precision, on the other hand, is how tight is your grouping. And up next is a couple of my own targets that will allow you to determine what was the accuracy of that group versus what was the precision of that group. Once you start becoming more proficient with targeting, you might try including a few more advanced techniques, such as double tap targeting. Please note, though, that this should be taken on only once you've achieved a certain level of proficiency in your targeting skills. And finally, in closing, I just want to note that although this was a thorough and in-depth review of some of the fundamentals of firearms, there's much more to learn, and that the best way to actually become familiar with all of these elements is to practice them. Nothing can actually replace your experience of time at the range or practicing your full field strips. So be sure to get out there and put these things that you've learned to use. And along the way, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to reach out to me. I wish you all safety and happiness in your employment of your firearm.